truth is the most convincing story that maps onto reality, and that's why the central narrative is falling apart.
Right now in the United States, people should not be walking around with masks.
We must see the central narrative for the fiction that it is. We are Americans.
While elections are sometimes messy, this was a secure election.
The founders began the fight for human liberty and self-governance, and it's up to us to finish the job.
I'll tell you what, we are in a truth emergency right now.
This is the end game.
It's Tuesday, July 9th, 2024, the 1266th day of dystopia. I'm your moderator, Chris Paul. Let's be reasonable. A warm welcome and hello to all of you listening through a paid subscription at imyourmoderator.substack.com. You can become a paid subscriber for as little as $50 a year or $5 a month. And in doing so, you will get the ad-free experience. You'll be invited to participate in the conversation over on Substack, and you'll be able to participate in the interactive live stream every Wednesday afternoon. And if you can't or you simply don't want to, continue listening to the podcast for free on Substack, a wide variety of podcast platforms, and of course, Rumble. All I ask is that you share it with your friends. You can find the links to the podcast, the writing, the social media, and the merch site by visiting linktree.com/I'mYourModerator. Anyone who understands the roller coaster we've been on these past few years knows we haven't reached the end yet, and there may still be hard times to come. And as we add $1 trillion to the national debt every 100 days, we could be headed for some shaky financial times. If you're like me, you're figuring out how to diversify and make sure some seeds are planted for whatever may come. And that's one of the many reasons I think Bitcoin is part of our future. But it's not only about money. Bitcoin looks to be a critical part of the next generation of technology, communications, energy, verification, and even national defense. I'd encourage everyone to do their research and do it now. And if you're convinced of the likelihood that Bitcoin is an essential part of our future, then you'll need an on-ramp. I recommend River. River empowers you to grow your portfolio without any unwanted surprises and eliminates third-party custodians, putting you in control of your assets. Open an account with no minimum purchase requirement. You can get your Bitcoin journey started with just $1. Visit partner.river.com/reasonable to create your River account today. That's partner.river.com/reasonable. Now, I know that many of you out there understand the need to diversify assets, or maybe you're looking to protect your retirement savings, but you're not quite there yet on Bitcoin. And you feel better about precious metals? I get that too. I think going in multiple directions is wise, and I do that myself. And when it comes to buying precious metals, you want to be working with a good company. And that's why I've partnered with Goldco. Goldco is a 6-time Inc. 5000 winner, 2022 Company of the Year, and they've helped people like you and me place over $2 billion in gold and silver. And I have gotten silver from Goldco. And right now they're offering my supporters up to $10,000 in bonus silver while supplies last. Don't pass this offer up. Go to reasonablegold.com now. This is your opportunity to protect you and your family from an out-of-control government before it's too late. So don't wait a second longer. Take action today. Click on the link in the podcast notes or go to reasonablegold.com now and get your free gold kit, your free IRA kit. You'll be glad you did. All right, so yesterday we discussed some of the brand new Joe Biden great replacement theories. We discussed the possibilities of a blitz primary where the DNC becomes that elimination style tournament or a competition reality show, if you will, where the nation decides which of these 6 terribly corrupt communists and perverts they would like to see cheat their way to 90 or 100 million votes in this November's very real election. And we talked about how the Uniparty and the media seem to be like the child, asking the magic 8 ball a question, shaking it over and over again because it doesn't like the answer that the magic 8 ball is producing. Can we get rid of Joe Biden? Concentrate and ask again. And oh, these poor communists and the standard issue villagers who love them, all of them addled by years of Trump derangement syndrome, smashing that magic 8 ball against the wall. Why won't the television tell me they've replaced the man I said was the greatest president ever, and certainly the most popular, 81 million real lawful American votes? They went along with that for 3.5 years while the television told them Joe Biden was super legitimate and just fine mentally and physically. Then the television told everyone all at once that, wait a second, maybe Joe Biden's not totally fine mentally and physically. And it got to the point where they could no longer deny it, so they had to accept this new reality, which was, in fact, an old reality that each and every one of them knows they've been denying for 3.5 years. But it's different now. Now they're allowed to admit it. Now the social incentives have changed. People could think that they're stupid or maybe even irresponsible for defending Joe Biden, now knowing that he's physically and mentally unfit and thinking, hey, maybe he didn't get those 81 million real lawful American votes. I mean, sure, they knew all of that 3.5 years ago, but that's the sort of thing you have to stifle and repress. Otherwise, college-educated suburban wine moms might be whispering at bake sales and school board meetings. And then the socially rent-seeking busybodies at your workplace might convince everyone you're racist. Life could just fall apart if you admit that Joe Biden wasn't physically and mentally fit for the last 3.5 years and didn't receive 81 million real lawful American votes. But it's okay. It's okay to admit it now. I mean, hopefully it's okay to admit it. If they admit it, that means there's a better chance that Joe Biden will be replaced. And so you kind of have to admit it for that reason. But what if we admit it and then Joe Biden's not replaced? Then all we've done is weaken Joe Biden, and that empowers Donald Trump. They have no idea what to do, and that's what happens when the truth becomes off limits. They're prepared to support any position that supports their position and their goals, but they're just not sure which position actually does that. They're hoping the magic 8 ball will tell them, but it keeps coming up short. And every time they're able to begin to coalesce around what the right position might be, at least for now, well, then Donald Trump opens his big mouth and says that he wants the thing we just decided we want. And we're always supposed to want the thing that Donald Trump doesn't want. So now we have no idea. Now, Trump's been saying he doesn't think Biden's going to make it to the gate. A clip went viral last week. Donald Trump in the driver's seat of his golf cart, his son Barron right next to him. Trump just hanging out, talking to some other people out on the course, apparently, who were recording him in kind of candid camera, hidden camera fashion. I don't know what kind of person would attempt to take secret cell phone video of the president while playing golf with his son. I tend to think that no one would do that, which makes me think that maybe that was just a viral piece of content produced on purpose. But here's what Trump said.
With the debate the other night.
Amazing.
He kicked that old broken down pile of crap.
Yeah.
It's a bad guy. He just quit, you know. He's quitting the race.
Is that right?
Yep, I got him out of the race. And that means we have Kamala. I think she's going to be better. She's so bad. She's so pathetic.
It's so amazing.
It's just so fucking bad. So,
I just can't imagine.
but can you imagine that guy with dealing with Putin and the president of China, who's a fierce person? He's a fierce man, a very tough guy. And they see him, they probably he can't. But they just announced he's probably quitting.
Good.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Just keep knocking him out, right?
So again, that is supposedly candid hidden camera footage of Trump on a golf course with his son next to him. It was released on X, formerly Twitter, by a man named Roger Sollenberger, who's a reporter for the Daily Beast. And now I'm not suggesting that he took the candid video. He has his email on his Twitter account as a tip line. Nothing unusual about any of that. But someone recorded the president with his son next to him on a golf course. That's something you can do with normal people. It's not the sort of thing I would expect you could do with Secret Service around and then send that video to reporters or otherwise publish it on social media. The Daily Beast reporter in his tweet said scoop. That usually means that reporter got that piece of content, that story, and he's the one releasing it to the public for the first time. So all of those aspects are off. Trump stating these things as fact that he's gotten rid of Joe Biden and now Biden will be replaced with Kamala. That is strange. And I don't have to go so far as to suggest that that's not Trump, that the video was made with AI or CGI or whatever. I'm not saying that. But I am saying I think there's probably a low likelihood that that is actually hidden camera, candid footage of Donald Trump just expressing himself casually that then goes viral. I think there was probably some planning, some intentionality around that. And once you discover that something seems unnatural in some way and seems intentional or motivated in some way, you can think about why someone might bother doing something like that. It's massively discrediting and dismissive of both the fake President Joe Biden and the fake Vice President Kamala Harris, who should be discredited and should be dismissed. They're both comically incompetent and inept characters. It's becoming hard to even take them seriously because they are so unfit and so unserious. But did Trump get Biden out of there with his debate performance? The answer has to be no. Joe Biden has been set up to be a fall guy, a vessel for the guilt and responsibility of the uniparty for years now. He's toast. He's getting heat from both sides. Donald Trump even posted yesterday on Truth Social, referencing the same statements and article I was referencing a couple weeks ago, the Politico piece that calls Biden toast. He's getting the heat from both sides. He's toast. It was always going to happen. It's been part of their plan. You have seen the response. They're now promoting a television spectacle to provide numerous viewpoints of anti-Trump nonsense, competing for who gets to be the most popular out of those characters, saying only very bad things about Donald Trump and his supporters and nothing bad about the uniparty regime that has caused all of this to happen. We are supposed to pretend that that debate was real and organic and natural, everything just happening spontaneously in real time, and then everyone reacting naturally after the fact, despite all of us having seen that every television character responded to this new revelation of Joe Biden's physical and mental unfitness in the exact same way, in scripted fashion. Are we to believe that Donald Trump is not aware of these elements? Of course he's aware of these elements. Even if you were one of those people that believed Donald Trump's only talent was getting attention, manipulating public narratives, staging these elaborate productions, this would still be right in his wheelhouse. Did he get rid of Biden? Is Biden going to be replaced with Kamala Harris? That's what he said on the golf cart, assuming the video is real. And that's what people reacted to. For the last week, the Uniparty members and the television characters are all over TV clamoring for Joe Biden to drop out, to resign, whatever it takes. They're willing to say absolutely anything about him and propose any possible solution. Let's just get him out of there. Van Jones was on TV the other day saying that we are running Kamala now or we are running her later. We should just run her now. And what he meant was, they can either get Biden to drop out, make Kamala Harris the presidential candidate, and then fill in one of their rising stars in the VP role, or they can keep things as they are, everyone knowing that their vote for Biden is eventually a vote for Kamala Harris once Biden drops out from his old age, his incompetence, his physical and mental unfitness. Kamala now or Kamala later. But they don't want Kamala now or later, and they do want to get rid of Joe Biden. These people who they voted for in 2020 are now both totally untenable to most of the people who bothered voting for them. Not that there were all that many people, relatively speaking, who voted for them, But they don't want Joe and they don't want Kamala, despite the uniparty politicians and the television characters telling them that for the last 12 days now. The entire time, Donald Trump just agreeing with them, going right along with it. Yeah, they got to get rid of Biden. In fact, I got rid of him for them. And he's going to be replaced with Kamala, who's even worse. Imagine shaking that magic 8-ball, asking if we were going to be able to get rid of Joe Biden. And what comes up is not an 8-ball response. It's Donald Trump's face being like, yeah, I got rid of Biden. It's going to be Kamala now. She's even worse. This is what these people go through mentally on a regular basis. They are totally dialed in to whatever the television is saying and whatever the culture around them is reflecting. And they all share in that chaos and mania. They participate in it willingly because they're addicted to the TV. And the TV confuses them and upsets them. So they need to talk to other people about what they saw on TV so they can feel better about it. They've been shaking the magic 8-ball for 9 years, and eventually Donald Trump's face always shows up, and they never ever get to. Signs point to yes. And once they come to accept that their best position also happens to be the thing that Donald Trump is saying he wants to, and they begin to search for new options, well, Donald Trump goes on Sean Hannity and says this.
And, it looks to me like he may very well stay in. He's got an ego and he doesn't want to quit. He doesn't want to do that. It just looks to me like that's what he wants. I think Jill would like to see him stay. She's having a good time. I notice she really seems to be having a good time. And I'm hearing that Hunter is calling the shots. So this isn't necessarily a very positive thing for our country. But I think he, might very well stay in. And if he does, nobody wants to give that up that way. He's going to feel badly about himself for a long time. It's hard to give it up that way, the way where they're trying to force him out.
Now Trump thinks he's going to stay. He's got an ego and all that. He's got his reputation to protect. Jill, she's having a great time being first lady. She's not ready to stop being first lady yet. A sub-narrative has already developed that suggests Jill is actually functioning as the president, and she's taken pictures to that effect in the past. We're supposed to pretend that's really happening. He's saying that Jill and Hunter are calling the shots. They can't let Joe drop out. Joe doesn't want to drop out because he's got an ego. And it's not right after 5+ decades in American politics, selling out the interests of your constituents, being corrupted and compromised by our foreign adversaries, engaging in every potential shady business deal and money laundering scheme that ever crosses your desk. All of that complemented by a lifetime of deep-seated perversion and racism. You can't just let yourself be forced out. And so he's staying. Jill and Hunter are calling the shots. And many of you know that on Monday evenings, I host a show called Hindsight 2020 with my friend Patrick Gunnels over on Badlands Media, where we cover the news from the week that was back in 2020. So we're basically going through, again, 4-year-old news, examining with a fresh point of view all of the deception of 2020. And so when I'm preparing for that show and researching those old issues, one of the sources that I always go to is the archive of Trump's tweets from that year. And he had an interesting one on July 4th of 2020. He quote tweeted a post from the reporter Kimberly Strassel, who said, finally, Biden asked more precise questions about monuments, responds by saying that it would be better if local governments took steps to take down Confederate statues, but won't condemn people lawlessly tearing them down. So, of course, he was talking about the destruction of monuments throughout the Summer of Love in 2020. Trump's response was this. He said, this would be the beginning of the end. He has no clue. But he wouldn't be calling the shots. Amazingly prescient and timely, is it not? 4 years almost to the day. And Trump is on a national news program saying that Joe Biden isn't even making the decision about whether or not he's going to continue on as fake president. Jill, the fake community college professor, and Hunter Biden the bagman, drug addict, and whoremonger are deciding whether or not Joe Biden can continue being president. Joe's not calling the shots, but again, he never was. And not to steer too far off track, but there was another amazing tweet by Donald Trump on July 4th of 2020. He said, "The New York Times is a very corrupt and dishonest media outlet that suffers Trump derangement syndrome at a level rarely seen. They will lose any remaining credibility on the evening of November 3rd. Of course, he's referring to the stolen election of November 3rd, 2020. The New York Times would lose any remaining credibility that night? That's incredible. How did he know what was going to happen? But let's get back to the Trump clip. Joe's not calling the shots. Jill and Hunter want Joe Biden to remain in the presidential campaign for the very real election coming up this fall. Imagine what it's like in these people's minds, holding on by a thread to Joe Biden for 3.5 years. And then in one night, you realize that everyone understands you've been lying for 3.5 years. A very small number of those people immediately doubled down and said, you know what? I'm going to keep on lying for Joe Biden. In fact, I will say whatever I am told to say by anyone. But there were a lot of people out there who finally just threw up their hands and said, enough is enough. I can't deny this anymore. I'm going to admit that I did know this the entire time so that I don't seem like one of these stupid people that can't admit what's right in front of absolutely everyone. Like that potentially having a mentally and physically unfit person in the position of President of the United States of America, leader of the free world, most powerful man in the entire world, might not be the right move for the country. Well, yeah, they figured that out, too. Even the people at Fox News figured that out. Maybe we shouldn't have pretended this man was a legitimate president for the last 3.5 years, now that everyone can see he's mentally and physically unfit. I mean, it's cool. We at Fox News told people, hey, Joe Biden's mentally and physically unfit. I hope they don't ask us if he's also an illegitimate president. What would they say then? Now, I suppose getting these people to admit to a blatant and undeniable reality simply staring them in the face from 2 inches away is progress. But it's not as though they're thinking for themselves. They're not assessing the world as it emerges to them, analyzing what it all means. They're just switching from one set of slogans to a new set of slogans. This new set of slogans will protect them while they adopt this new viewpoint. Joe Biden's mental and physical incapacitation was hidden from me by the media. The conspiracy theorists made it seem like it was fake because they're always wrong about everything. Now that I can see the thing everyone said 4 years ago is true, I am also willing to admit it's true. How bold. I can see you've woken up. I saw an advertisement today for a comedy special on Netflix, Joe Rogan, August 3rd. I'm sure everybody's going to watch it. Go ahead and watch it. I'll probably watch it. I want to see what he says because it's going to be very popular. A lot of people will watch it. Joe Rogan will say some controversial things that, yes, he's been rehearsing for probably a year at the comedy club he started and owns in Austin, but it'll be new to the general public. I mean, except for the things that he says on his show that is on for 3 hours at a time, 3 or 4 days a week. But besides all of that, this will be the first time the general public ever hears any of these ideas, and these ideas will amount to a new set of slogans, and everyone will immediately adopt those slogans, knowing that it's now okay to say the thing that the man on TV is saying. It's always okay to say the thing that the man on TV is saying, assuming that it's a popular enough channel. After the man who makes $100 million a year to say things that keep his audience just inside the pen, but almost out, still very much in, but almost out, everyone will have permission. We will have moved forward to a new truth. And because it will be the acceptance of a truth we've tried to get people to accept for a very long time, despite their constant denials, We will think, oh, finally, this new truth has been accepted. People have woken up. But have they woken up? Or have they simply switched from repeating one set of slogans to repeating a new set of slogans, still waiting for permission from an authoritative source to say the thing that virtually everyone has known is true for a long time? And if everyone has known it was true for a long time, why do they still deny it? Oh, it's because they haven't gotten permission from an authoritative source on television, someone popular enough that you can be sure numerous other people will have agreed to repeat the same slogan, so that you are never isolated and on an island having to defend a controversial slogan without any help around. And you have to wonder, couldn't these people have said these things way earlier? And I know it's not possible, because there is a very thoroughly scripted plan that requires the people with the biggest audiences who get paid the most to lie to everybody for years on end, because if they don't, then something can stop what is coming. Now, the central narrative has been incorporating ideas for a while about how the election might have been rigged in Joe Biden's favor. Maybe things weren't 100% the way we were told. Now, you can't go around telling the big lie on television as an authoritative source. Not yet. Before the TV gives everyone permission to say those sorts of things, you just have to call Joe Biden president for as long as the TV says he's president, even if it's proven that he's mentally and physically incapacitated and not in command of even the most basic decisions. If it's proven for years that no one in his administration has any idea of what's going on, you still have to call him president, despite the fact that he wasn't elected and, let's be honest, wasn't inaugurated. They filmed the first 2 years of Joe Biden's presidency from a set that they say was across the street. Now, I know, putting all these facts together in a row makes you think, wait a second, is he suggesting there's some kind of conspiracy theory going on here just because this totally weird, unexplainable set of facts that we've just ignored for years at a time really hammers home the point that Joe Biden's presidency is in no way what we've ever come to expect from a real presidency? Well, yes, I am suggesting a conspiracy theory. I'm saying, hey, maybe something else might be going on. I mean, he didn't win an election. Joe Biden did not receive 81 million real lawful American votes. No one can substantiate it. That's why they don't. That's why they don't let anyone check. And very few people in this country have actually factored that basic and obvious reality into their thinking at all times. Because despite that being irrefutably real, the television says it's not, which means people don't have the permission to agree. If no one has permission to say what they believe, how could you possibly know if anyone else agrees? The incentive and punishment structure lines up, and all of a sudden everyone convinces themselves they simply didn't see what they saw, no matter what sort of consequences them or their family might suffer from lying about that most basic and obvious fact. They don't have permission to say it, and without permission, you might get punished. Maybe we can just be quiet for, let's say, 4 years, and they'll never punish us for speaking out. Now, sure, our failure to speak out might cause the society to crumble and our lives to be destroyed in numerous ways, but we wouldn't want to get punished for saying what everyone saw. I mean, if it's true, then surely the television, the news, will tell us. And if they haven't told us yet, and if they've said there's no way it's true for 3.5 years, well, they'll still probably tell us someday if it turns out to be true. And at that time, we'll all agree that we knew the whole time. And then, hey, we might be able to work toward fixing it. And I was asked earlier today, as I am many times online, well, what is your solution? And occasionally people are being sincere. Sometimes people say they're being sincere and think they're being sincere and still aren't being sincere. When people hear that our elections aren't legitimate and it's not possible to create a legitimate president through illegitimate elections, and it's entirely possible that the Uniparty will steal all those races down ballot, in state and local races, right down to city councils and rural school boards, well, occasionally they'll get a little deflated and dejected, maybe even depressed. They'll think I'm saying there's no hope and this state will just continue forever. It will always be like this. We will just be enslaved to these illegitimate rulers who are not looking out for our needs in the least. They'll think, oh, it can't go on like this. It's been over 4 years of this tyranny already. And there are a couple ways to react to that. One of them is, hey, you've been doing it your whole life. You just found out about it a few years ago. So you got to stop freaking out about it. And if it's as bad as you say it is, and it might be, then it's not going to be reversed by winning a rigged election on a system they control. People find this depressing. I don't find this depressing. People say, what is the solution? Not because they want a solution and not because they're willing to accept the reality of the problem, but to argue that without being able to give them a solution, everyone should simply stop mentioning the problem as if it will just disappear. If we don't talk about stolen elections at all, and we happen to be told that we won one of them, well, I guess that will mean that the elections aren't stolen after all, and then we can fix them. What? No. The point is you have to look at the reality and analyze the reality. If the regime controls the election system, and they do, and the election system is set up in such a way that it is thoroughly impossible for the reported results to accurately reflect the will and intent of the voters, then if we are to have elections and we are to win elections and we are to restore our society through elections, what we need to do is adopt a system that can create the sort of legitimacy we seek. It's not to pretend that the system we have can do that when we know it can't. And here's the thing about coming up with solutions to very complex and difficult problems. Sometimes it requires more than one brain to think of a solution, which means a bunch of people need to be thinking of a solution, and it has to be one that will work and one that will be adopted by all the people. Both parts are required. So what does it mean that so many people who know our elections are stolen do not want that spoken and understood en masse? You need to have a solution that will work, and everyone has to have buy-in. You could create the perfect system and market it broadly to everyone. And standard issue villagers on the uniparty right will worry that the uniparty left will benefit from the new system, while standard issue villagers on the uniparty left will worry that the uniparty right will benefit. And they will both resolve to come together and preserve the old system. You need a solution that works, and you need mass buy-in. Now, I don't claim to be the person that can come up with the solution that works, but I can list some of the qualities that a new system would have to have. It would have to be reliable, consistent, verifiable, transparent, easy to record, unchangeable. I'm certain that there are systems that can accomplish that. I'm not sure what the immediate solution is, but I'm sure there is one. And no matter how hard it is to implement that solution, I'm pretty sure that we can get there in less than 4 years of this communist tyranny. And you know what would help us come to the proper solution? A bunch of people focused on the problem rather than thinking of new ways to ballot harvest and telling everyone how important it is to make your voting plan 120 days before an election we don't even know is happening. How are you going to get everybody on the same page? Well, they got to know there's a problem. And if you're trying to hide the problem because you think you're going to solve everything by winning a rigged election, what are you accomplishing? Again, this is a total inversion within the false reality. It is a dependency on information from the authoritative source and a reliance on government as the ultimate decider of everything in your life and everyone else's life. Again, I might not be able to describe the perfect solution to our elections, but I'm quite certain that smart people have been working on that for a long time. I would imagine that out of the two aspects we need here, one, figuring out what the perfect solution is, and two, getting mass buy-in across the board, number one is almost or is already accomplished. So what's left? Getting mass buy-in. Well, why would people buy into a new system if they know the other one still works for them? How about that? They're not convinced that the other one doesn't work for them. Why? Because they all cucked and called Joe Biden president and pretended he actually got 81 million real lawful American votes. And they don't really want to be exposed as the sort of people who'd be wrong about something like that. That's not only the college-educated suburban wine moms and the socially rent-seeking busybodies at work. That's most of the uniparty political class and almost all of the television characters. It's odd to be in a position where I have to defend myself from sharing what is obviously true when the public acknowledgement of that truth is a necessary step in fixing the problem. But instead it's used to discredit the understanding that our elections actually are totally illegitimate. It is a system designed to select the representatives without input from voters. We reverse the order of things. The narrative supports the agenda. The election results support the approval of the narrative. And the election results aren't even real. They just tell you what they need to tell you to support the narrative. It's not better to pretend this is not the situation. And so I don't know whether the person asking the question today was sincere or not. And it doesn't matter. I find the tactic annoying, but I'm not taking it personally. The point is that people are so scared of losing an election because they believe that would mean that this situation just continues forever, that they are actually supporting a strategy that will ensure this continues forever. Donald Trump could wipe out 99% of the federal government, make it totally bare bones, and eliminate any need for federal elections, and the elections in our states would still be rigged and stolen. Donald Trump may be closely involved in figuring out what the election system might be moving forward. But if we haven't reached this critical mass, this broad consensus that a new system is required by the time November 5th rolls around, then the result of the election will be reaching that critical mass. People understanding, oh yeah, our elections are obviously totally stolen. Why were we denying this for so long? And the answer, of course, is, well, we got to win this next election, so we better pretend the votes are real. If we don't win this next election, we might just go forward with this illegitimate tyranny thrust upon us. And for the people who are worried about 2024, how did that strategy work in 2021, 2022, 2023? Well, it was a disaster each time. Don't tell me about Glenn Youngkin. How did things work after Californians had recalled Gavin Newsom? Oh, they just stole that recall election. Gavin stays. How's it going with rigged and stolen elections around the country when it comes to ballot measures on abortions? Is it going well? No, it's not going well. How is Donald Trump going to fix that in your state? How is anyone in your state going to fix that when the only people who know it's a problem decide to pretend it isn't in hopes of sometime in the future creating a new God King who will then fix it? All of that should be understood. It should be okay. It's not depressing. It's fine. We are on the path to fixing this. That's so much better than pretending there is not a problem. All it requires is one little flash, one moment, one little change, like we saw a couple weeks ago as a debate played out on television. People knew immediately that it was now publicly untenable for them to continue promoting the viewpoint that they had promoted for the last 3.5 years. No, not everyone, but a whole lot of people just realized that they can't go around cutting off conversations about Joe Biden's physical and mental fitness anymore. What does it mean when it becomes publicly untenable to pretend that Joe Biden actually won his election and that our elections actually are free and fair, safe and secure, and that the reported results accurately reflect the will and intent of the voters? Pretty soon, that's not something people are going to be able to continue to lie about. And we need to reach that point. We need to reach that point as fast as possible. That's been the project the whole time, because you can apply this same framing to all of the problems we have, which is why we need to do more than applaud when people switch from one set of slogans to a newer, better set of slogans. Yes, it changes the permission structure. It changes the permission structure because the incentive and punishment structures have already been overturned. That can happen as the result of these mass media events, but it doesn't have to happen that way. And that's why people actually need to wake up and think for themselves and then speak up about what they've discovered. Because we need to be the ones changing the incentive and punishment structure in our own social circles and at the local level, so that that can radiate out in the same way the silencing and the coercion radiate out from those college-educated suburban wine moms and the socially rent-seeking busybodies at the workplace. Isn't it crazy how a few tantrums from the child brains can shut up everyone around them for years at a time? Oh, we don't want to bring that subject up around Stacey again. We know what happened at Christmas 2018. I mean, yeah, it's been 6 years, but there's no indication that Stacey's over it. And so we'd better not talk about it. Not only just around Stacey, we better not talk about it anywhere, because it might get back to Stacey that we discussed it. And nobody wants to deal with Stacey. And I get it. I don't want to deal with Stacey either. But if that's a situation you understand, then you should also understand that you're being held hostage by a crazy person. One flash, one moment, the permission structure changes as a result of the incentive and punishment structure already falling away. At that point, people immediately begin adopting new positions as quickly as they can, trying to revise their past positions in such a way as to incorporate the new information without admitting what they were wrong about before, because they don't want to be held responsible and they want to maintain their reputation as a smart person whose finger is on the pulse of what's happening. And it's at those moments where it is most important to reach that critical mass. We talked about catharsis. We talked about that emotional moment, that moment of vulnerability. The attention being captured and redirected in a way that alleviates that sense of disruption and vulnerability. We cannot allow all of this to simply be directed by the television characters. But it seems like that's what people are willing to do out of fear that we might lose a rigged and stolen election because too many people did not show up to cast quote unquote votes that won't be properly counted, under the assumption that all of this will be fixed after the rigged and stolen election by the quote-unquote winners of the rigged and stolen elections, who at that point will understand that our election system must be fixed. And, they're sure to install a legitimate one at that point. People would definitely speak up then, won't they? And that's a good question. I don't know. Will they speak up? And if that's what we're waiting on, why can't that just happen now? One flash, one moment. That's it. The belief changes, and we are off in a new direction. Now, I'm bringing all of this up because Elon Musk has spent the last couple of days highlighting election rigging, election fraud, election manipulation issues over there on X, formerly Twitter. And so some large amount of his 190 million Twitter followers are having their attention drawn to stories that highlight the fact our elections are not legitimate. They are rigged, they are manipulated, and they are stolen. These decisions are made for us by the people who intend to make all decisions for everyone, hoping to eventually just pass that role off to the machine that they also eventually plan to upload their consciousness into. They have control over the system. Why wouldn't they exercise it? Why would they leave that decision up to us when we will believe almost anything that they play on television? It's hard to even blame them when you think about it. It would be like letting your 3-year-old decide what house you should buy and them choosing the shed outside the preschool. And knowing this, we still allow them to tell us who we decided we wanted, and then we allow that person to tell us how to live our lives. It's madness. And why do we assume that they are giving us the correct answer? Oh, because it corresponds to the polls we saw on television. And our understanding that while, yes, people are extremely dissatisfied with their government, we're still a 50-50 country, and this is just the sort of thing that happens sometimes. You don't want to go around telling the big lie and spreading conspiracy theories, regardless of whether or not you're simply submitting to a dictatorship. If you destroy faith in our democracy, you might be punished and called bad names. And I'm sure we could make it through another few years of this, right? Now, again, I don't find this depressing or worrisome because we have made massive progress on all of these fronts over the last 3.5 years, and we're about to push it over the line. And then the voices of the authoritative source will respond in agreement, and it will seem like they are leading the charge because they will be the ones who have just given permission for everyone else to finally admit what's been plainly obvious for the last 3.5 years. And to be fair, much longer for many, many people. A lot of people lost their faith in elections in 2000, some in 2004, and some long before that. But a whole lot of those people who knew about all that pretended somehow it just all turned wrong when they were told they could be punished for saying that the 2020 election was stolen. All of that can change in a moment, and it will change in a moment, at least in terms of the public perception. And at that point, a remedy is possible, and not a moment prior. What would the public reaction be if Donald Trump simply presented to you a new election system? It could be the most legitimate thing in the world, and the communists wouldn't accept it. It's going to require the belief, which requires people speaking honestly about what they know and understanding that despite the fact that we don't have the solution in our sights right now, we can understand that a solution is not possible until we reach that critical mass of people demanding one. If we choose not to do that on our own, we're going to get the hose again. But this isn't depressing. It's not deflating. In fact, the process is moving along faster than it has ever moved. The sort of stories that we used to see as headlines on the Gateway Pundit or a report on War Room are now being highlighted on X, formerly Twitter, by Elon Musk. And no matter what you think about Elon Musk, he is one of the most important public communicators just based on the sheer size of his platform and his influence. The only other person more influential than Elon Musk in the Western world is probably Donald Trump. These are two of the only people in the world who can change the public conversation anytime they want to. And I understand that people are skeptical about him. Good. Be skeptical about everyone. But whether he's a good guy or a bad guy, he's still doing the thing that he's doing. And he's hitting it on a number of levels. Obviously, there are the levels that have been incorporated for a while, like the Hunter Biden laptop being censored, like Trump being censored and silenced and pursued by corrupt political actors. Everything from the Steele dossier through Russiagate, through the Mueller investigation, all the way through the Ukraine impeachment hoax, the subversion of the presidency throughout COVID, the summer of love, the changes to election law, mass mail-in balloting, ballot harvesting. All of that has been incorporated to some degree or another into the central narrative for years. But we are now in a period of rapid acceleration. We talked yesterday about the SAVE Act being brought up by Speaker Mike Johnson in the very legitimate House of Representatives this week. Elon's highlighted that. Sundance yesterday over at the conservative treehouse he posts on X, formerly Twitter, as the last refuge. Yesterday he wrote, they are not, quote unquote, importing Democrat voters. They are importing people, names. That allows the state fraud process to generate ballots. This is an important distinction. The migrants will not use the ballots. The DNC harvesters will collect them, fill them out, parentheses Obama. Then the precinct workers will scan them and count them, parentheses Clyburn, which we discussed a few weeks ago, and his network of churches around the country, what the television refers to as all the black church ladies who get out the vote. Sundance concludes illegals don't need to vote They only need to exist to create a ballot. And I think this is largely true. There's a level beneath this that says they don't actually need that person to exist at all. But this is certainly something that we've discussed plenty of times. It is not the illegal aliens receiving their ballot and then casting a vote that ultimately gets counted. It's that their registry allows a ballot to be created for them that will never reach them, that will be quote unquote harvested without having to go anywhere, because why would you bother sending it out when you know no one's going to be on the other end to receive it? Though I'm not suggesting they don't do that too. They absolutely do. In fact, I would still guess that that spate of stolen debit cards with COVID relief money on them in the major cities around the country were probably being collected by the same rings of people who will then go collect and harvest those additional ballots. But that, my friends, is a conspiracy theory still. That would make a lot of sense next to what Sundance is suggesting here. But his point should be well taken. The system allows the creation of ballots and the sending out of those ballots to anyone who is on the voter roll. That's not every state, but it's many states. And they're allowed to add names to those voter rolls right up through Election Day till the last minute of the election. Anyone on the voter rolls will have a ballot made for them. And if you're going to make the ballot, you might as well cast it. You might as well vote it and count it, and then wage 2.5 months of lawfare to make sure that you are able to capture the office of the most powerful man in the history of the world. So Elon Musk saw that post from Sundance and he quote tweeted it. He said, "This is a more accurate description of what happens regarding voter fraud." And of course it is. And I'm not suggesting in any way that Sundance over at the conservative treehouse hasn't known this for a long time and hasn't been clearly saying it for a long time. But the television characters haven't been. They just talk about illegal aliens voting. Actually, it's a little worse than that. They talk about how Democrats want illegal aliens to vote. They don't even go so far as to talk about all of the millions of votes cast in the names of illegal aliens. Because, of course, you wouldn't want to more deeply expose the system for what it is. That might cause people not to trust it, and everybody knows that the only way out of this is to win a rigged election. Something that is not logically possible, nor is it morally possible. You could be the beneficiary of a rigged and stolen election, but all that would then make you is a Biden supporter who got his way between 2020 and 2024. We can win legitimately. Why would we ever want to be announced the winners of a rigged and stolen election and then pretend it wasn't rigged and stolen? We can win legitimately as soon as a system that allows for a legitimate win is implemented. Yesterday, the Wall Street Apes account over on X, formerly Twitter, posted this video clip of Speaker Mike Johnson on May 8th of this year giving a press conference announcing that they would be pushing the SAVE Act.
And due to the wide open border that the Biden administration has refused to close, in fact, that they engineered to open, we now have so many non-citizens in the country that if only 1 out of 100 of those voted, they would cast hundreds of thousands of votes. And since our elections are so razor thin in these days that we're in, and just a few precincts in a few states decide the makeup of Congress and who is elected to the White House, this is a dangerously high number, and it is a great concern to millions and millions of Americans. It could obviously change the outcome of our elections, and this is not an empty threat or concern. I'll let my colleague Chip Roy here in a moment get into the specifics of the SAVE Act, but I want to address why we need this legislation. Some have noted that it's already a crime for non-citizens to vote in a federal election, and that is true. But here are 4 things that are also true. Number 1, it's true that no current mechanism to ensure only those registering or voting are actually citizens. There's no mechanism that exists to make sure that's correct. If a nefarious actor wants to intervene in our elections, all they have to do is check a box on a form and sign their name. That's it. That's all that's required. And there's a very small chance that illegal would get caught, because here's the other thing. Our states do not have the election infrastructure in place to confirm what they've said. Number two, it's true that Joe Biden has welcomed millions and millions of illegal aliens. We think the number, I believe the number is close to probably, at this point, 16 million illegals who have come into this country since Joe Biden walked into the Oval Office. That includes sophisticated criminal syndicates and agents of adversarial governments here in our borders and even on humanitarian parole. And that means the millions that have been paroled can simply go to their local welfare office or the DMV and register to vote there. And please understand this. States are currently prohibited from asking somebody to prove that they're a citizen when they use the federal voter registration form. Third truth. It is also true that a growing number of localities are blurring the lines for non-citizens by allowing them to vote in municipal local elections. In cities and towns in California, in Maryland, Vermont, and even right here in D.C. You might not know this, but non-citizens are voting. Number four, it's true that Democrats have expressed a desire to turn non-citizens into voters. That's what this open border has been all about. Former Judiciary Committee Chairman Jerry Nadler admitted that to me, expressly stated it to me in a committee hearing in a video that's gone viral just last year, a year and a half ago. Stacey Abrams said it in 2018 on the campaign trail. In their rare moments of candor, they will tell you the truth that this is something they are for. 2 months ago, every Senate Democrat voted to count illegal aliens in the census, to help them shore up more seats in Congress and more votes in the Electoral College. And this week, House Democrats will also have an opportunity to go on record on the same issue. In recent days, we've seen a growing number of folks on student visas show their willingness to break the law and utterly disrupt our way of life and threaten law-abiding students who are actually American citizens. If they're willing to take over buildings and physically terrorize their fellow students, why would they not be willing to lie on a voter registration form? It's clear that our election process is worth protecting. It is our responsibility as members of Congress and concerned leaders of citizens groups and organizations who care about the integrity of our system and our elections. It is our duty to ensure that this is done. Even if you weren't concerned about the drop boxes and the ballot harvesting and the mail-in ballots in 2020, you definitely should be concerned that illegal aliens might be voting in 2024.
And the Wall Street Apes account provided some analysis as well. If you want to go read that, by all means, check it out. But for the purposes of this conversation, let's focus on Elon Musk highlighting that post and responding this way. He said, when combined with mail-in ballots, the system is designed to make it impossible to prove fraud. Mail-in and drop-box ballots should not be allowed, as cameras on the in-person voting stations would at least prevent large-scale fraud by counting how many people showed up versus ballots cast. And of course, that's a very simple method, but that's not even required because they know people's location data at all times. The truth is they already know who you're going to vote for. And for whatever candidates down ballot, you might not even know what they stand for in the least, how they think about any issue. And they know you'll vote for them because of the letter next to their name. But even if that weren't true, they could know you would vote for that person just based on all your other beliefs and tendencies. The data exists. You can't just assume no one's using it. But to return to the point, Elon Musk is starting massive public conversations with each and every one of these posts. These are the sorts of things we weren't allowed to say in 2020. And again, there is absolutely some danger to the fact that all of the people who controlled the conversation then are still controlling the conversation now. And they are setting the pace along the timeline of when these media deployments will make it impossible for people to just continue repeating the same slogans. There's reason to be concerned about that, at least a little bit, but regardless, it's happening. But he didn't stop there. In another post that was not a reply to anyone, he wrote, electronic voting machines and anything mailed in is too risky. We should mandate paper ballots and in-person voting only. And he attached 4 screenshots. The first quoting an article from the New York Times that said what we found was disturbing. Halderman said in a June 2017 Senate Intelligence Committee hearing, we could reprogram the machine to invisibly cause any candidate to win. We also created malicious software, vote stealing code that could spread from machine to machine like a computer virus and silently change the election outcome. A Bucks County, and that's Pennsylvania, native and professor and director of the Center for Computer Security and Society at the University of Michigan, Halderman said cybersecurity is critical in the fight to protect American elections, quote, the bedrock of our democracy. Halderman is the expert in the Georgia case with Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger being overseen by Judge Totenberg. This has all been true the entire time, but his report was finally approved of by CISA like 2 years ago, admitting finally that they actually have no way of knowing whether it was the safest and most secure election of all time. Elon posted another article from GeekWire. It has been nearly 20 years since Bill Gates jumped on the stage at the Comdex trade show and introduced a new operating system called Windows CE. So you can imagine the dismay when a reporter for Vice News discovers that some Diebold voting machines that will be used in the 2016 election are still running outdated versions of the Microsoft operating system. Vice interviews University of Michigan computer science professor J. Alex Halderman, who says the U.S. is painting a bullseye on its election system by using antiquated touchscreen voting machines. And the article notes that that segment is available to HBO subscribers. And of course, that's in the documentary film called Kill Chain that has been up on HBO now for years and years. The reporter for Vice, Michael Moynihan, gives a slight chuckle when looking at a Diebold machine and notes that it is running a 2003 version of WindowsCE.net. In the next screenshot, Elon Musk attaches the headline of that article: Microsoft's Windows CE powers some U.S. touchscreen voting systems, causing concern among security experts. That's from October 25th, 2016. Why would they have published that right then? Because they were worried about Donald Trump winning the election. And finally, he enclosed a screenshot from Wired, an article from 2015, The Dismal State of America's Decade-Old Voting Machines. Subheadline: Some election officials scour eBay for decommissioned equipment they can cannibalize for parts. Very safe, very secure. There is no way to produce a legitimate winner of our elections, period. This has been true the entire time. The only thing stopping it from being changed is the fact that we have not achieved that critical mass. We don't have full public buy-in because the public, by and large, doesn't understand that the problem with our elections is actually the biggest problem in our society outside our money. I can't tell you what the exact solution is, but I am absolutely certain we can't implement it without that mass public buy-in, and we're not going to get that mass public buy-in if everyone keeps pretending we just need to win a stolen election, because then everything can be fixed. Again, it's madness, but it's not depressing because we are drawing ever closer. Whether you believe this is all on this timeline naturally and organically, or whether you believe that it's all been scripted and scheduled, we are still at this point right now. We are approaching a point that was always necessarily going to happen. The reaching of that critical mass, that broad consensus across society demanding that things be changed. We are drawing ever closer to that point. The SAVE Act is right in everyone's faces. Elon Musk is highlighting pretty much the full range of systemic problems with our elections that make it absolutely impossible to achieve a legitimate result. And at the same time, we have Trump spokeswoman Liz Harrington posting a series of videos like this one from another hearing in Fulton County, Georgia.
McDougald, I represent Kevin Monkla in this proceeding. We appreciate the opportunity to present rebuttal to the presentation that was made to the board on May 7th. Through witnesses, I will present on three topics. First, the existence and handling of duplicates in the second machine count in Fulton County. Second, the question of missing ballot images in Fulton County. And third, the complete breakdown of the process controls or chain of custody controls in the election in Fulton and why that matters. Rebuttal on these 3 points is necessary to correct the presentation that was made to this board on May the 7th. The bottom line is that they told you things on those 3 topics: duplicate ballots, missing ballot images, and chain of custody documents, that are simply not accurate. The problems are much more serious, profound, and widespread than they would have you believe. The board needs to understand this topic, all 3 of these topics, in order to craft an appropriate response, an appropriate remedy for elections going forward. A big part of this board's job is to instill public confidence in elections, and getting to the bottom of these matters is essential to that task, as you have yourselves seen in the response of the audience. Confidence is not instilled when documented problems are swept under the rug.
And they have been swept under the rug for years. But now that's starting to change. Now the problems are becoming understood by the public. Now that the public is ready to understand them, realizing that Joe Biden's not an option. Doesn't matter if you thought you could deny it and get away with it. Just wait out the problem. It would take care of itself. It doesn't matter how you've tried to deny it. It doesn't matter what the truth might lead to. He's untenable. Everyone understands it. It's almost impossible for anyone to lie about it. There are some people who are truly deranged with some other deranged people around them who don't care about them at all, apparently. But those people are going to get left behind. There's nothing we can do. The point is, Joe Biden's untenable. And once people realize how thoroughly corrupted our elections are, you realize the elections are untenable. That is a necessary step on the path to solving the problem. It's not counter to the cause to encourage a focus and understanding of that most critical element. It's actually the only path to the solution. Our denial of that just pushes the solution farther away. And there has to be a solution. There has to be a way to provide for fully legitimate elections. Because if there isn't, then how would we choose who rules us? What do we think we're going to do? Just rule ourselves? They're not going to let us do that. Yeah, of course they're not. If you give them the choice, because if you give those evil people the choice to rule you, they'll understand you're incapable of making choices for yourself, and then they have the right to choose whatever it is you get, because they don't want to live with you in the shed out behind the preschool. Although, actually, now that I say that, I worry about that analogy, because the truth is they probably would be okay living in a shed outside a preschool, and that's just too dark. There has to be a way to create legitimate elections. Otherwise, we can't have elections anymore. And I don't know what that looks like either, but there's got to be a way. Because if you can't create legitimate elections, and we have to have elections, then our elections aren't elections. They're a narrative device to coerce our belief. And that is exactly what they are. But the good thing is, all you have to do to disarm and dismantle a narrative weapon is to point out the fact that it's bullshit and never agree with anything that relies on it being true. Donald Trump decided to weigh in with his own post on Truth Social about the SAVE Act and about our rigged and stolen elections. He wrote, "Republicans must pass the SAVE Act or go home and cry yourself to sleep. Non-citizen illegal migrants are getting the right to vote, being pushed by crooked Democrat politicians who are not being stopped by an equally dishonest Justice Department. Our whole voting system is under siege. Harmeet and David, go to court and get this stopped now. And he's talking about Harmeet Dillon, though I'm not sure which David. I think it may be a man named David Warrington, who is a partner at Harmeet Dillon's law firm. That's my best guess. So he told them to go to court now and get it stopped. He goes on, the Dems can't win on their policies. The only way they can win is to cheat. They do it at every level of government, and they do it well. That's how they get an incapacitated moron like Joe Biden elected. Get tough, RNC, and he highlights Michael Whatley, Speaker Johnson, and all state and local Republican politicians. The Justice Department is corrupt and won't do a thing to help. They have no shame. All I can say is that if I'm elected president, we will pursue election fraudsters at levels never seen before, and they will be sent to prison for long periods of time. We already know who you are. Don't do it. Zuckerbucks, be careful. And so some of that can certainly be left to interpretation, but mine is that sounds like a threat. He's saying if you don't get active on election fraud immediately, if you don't come out right now and talk about these stolen elections, I am going to go after each and every one of you. This sounds like Donald Trump is announcing last call. And this was also one of those things that necessarily had to happen. Maybe people at the federal government level will announce their decision in their vote for this SAVE Act in the illegitimate Congress that will absolutely never be signed into law by the fake President Joe Biden. Donald Trump is the magnificent sifter. This whole SAVE Act narrative is a sifting narrative. It is intended only for that because it cannot be made law and it cannot fix the problem even if it was made law. It is just a sifter, a magnificent sifter, but still just a sifter. Let's understand it for what it is. But what about at the state and local levels? Will Republicans come out and talk about how our elections are stolen? Are the Republicans in your area doing that? Are the people with the little R's next to their name that you believe you are committed to voting for even talking about election fraud? 3.5 years later, do they need Donald Trump to tell them when to do it? They certainly don't need his permission. I cannot imagine that Donald Trump would be out there taking these congressmen aside and saying, hey, it's just not time to talk about our stolen elections yet. I don't know everything. Maybe he is doing exactly that, but I feel like he probably isn't, because I think he understands that it's important for everyone's representatives, to the extent we are going to have a government, to actually be honest with their constituents and be responsive to the concerns of constituents. And the constituents are certainly concerned about the integrity of our elections. The Justice Department, he says, is corrupt and won't do a thing to help. Can you imagine how that might sound if you're a person engaged in election fraud or covering up election fraud while you benefit from election fraud, thinking that this corrupt justice system is going to protect you after Trump is back? Again, this is how he finished the post. They have no shame. All I can say is that if I'm elected president, we will pursue election fraudsters at levels never seen before, and they will be sent to prison for long periods of time. We already know who you are, and in capital letters, don't do it. Also in capital letters, Zuckerbucks, be careful. Is he talking to Mark Zuckerberg? I kind of think he's not. I kind of think he's talking to all of those people all around the country who are about to dip their hands in that big pot of regime cash and then go help the regime steal an election, which makes me wonder whether or not they might be able to track that sort of thing, and whether or not they would have tracked that sort of thing back in 2020. And that's how they know who all these people are. What in the world could it mean for people who believe that this has been a vast sting operation that has spanned the last 6 years? What could it mean for those people to believe that we need to win a rigged and stolen election, win in quotes, to fix everything when he's already telling you they have it all? If the backstop is there, and it certainly seems to be there, then what we should be doing is marching forward in truth as boldly as we can. That's what we were supposed to be doing the entire time. And instead, people are worried to tell the truth about our rigged and stolen elections for fear that we might not win one. Again, it's absolute madness. If we are going to remedy this problem, two things absolutely necessarily must happen. There must be a workable solution, and we must reach a critical mass of people demanding change who will buy into the new system. And that requires people understanding what the problem actually is. Think about this like walking down a long path to a destination that's so far away you can barely see it. And we've been walking and walking and walking over the course of the last 3.5 years. And now we're getting almost all the way there. We can begin to really understand what this destination looks like. And then people are like, no, I don't think I can go all the way there. Not until you tell me what color the carpets are. Like, hey, I don't know what color the carpets are. And it doesn't matter. I mean, I guess it matters a little bit. I would hate to have some terrible looking carpets just like anybody else. But I can't give you every detail of the destination. I can tell you that's what the destination is. And I can tell you, at least generally speaking, what sorts of things absolutely must happen if that is indeed the destination. But that's all I can offer. You said you wanted to get there. That's where it is. If you're not going to proceed until I can tell you what the carpets are, well, then you're not going to proceed and you're never going to get there. Sometimes you just have to keep going in the direction, even if the destination is not totally known. And that's especially true when you can't go back. And it makes me feel really weird to say that right now, because I just remembered that Joe Rogan's upcoming live comedy special is called Burn the Boats. All right, so tomorrow's interactive live stream is going to be at 3 p.m. Eastern. I will send that link out in a Substack blog post sometime between now and then. And I would encourage you all to ask questions, leave comments, suggest topics or articles for the discussion tomorrow. And for people who are not paid subscribers, I will be back on Thursday at the same reasonable time on the same reasonable podcast network. I don't have a network. Masks and lockdowns don't work. They lied to you about a pandemic. And Joe Biden will never be president.
In my mind, that's the end game.
If you're listening to this episode for free, you can support me and support the show and the work I do by signing up for a paid subscription at imyourmoderator.substack.com. You can do so for as low as $50 a year or $5 a month. Comes out to under $0.25 per episode, and you'll blast right through the paywall for all of the writing. The merch store is www.cancelcouture.com, and you can find everything else by heading to Linktree. Linktree.com/imyourmoderator. And I'll see you soon out on the range. It's happening!